Hello, this is Julie Palmer with Palmer Complete Health, and I am privileged to be with RJ Singer from Alchemy Wellness Center today. He is an acupuncturist. He does astrology. He does amazing qigong, but what we're going to talk about today is Feng Shui. So if you'll give us a little bit of your background, RJ.
Sure. Well, in terms of Feng Shui, the first introduction I ever had of it was actually through permaculture 28 years ago. And the first time I ever even heard the words Feng Shui were from Bill Mollison, the founder of permaculture, in a small gathering, kind of a lecture environment. And he brought it up because he was really into looking at the patterns of nature and how understanding the patterns of nature, then you could understand and design systems for biological living systems that interact with each other for a better home environment, but also for growing your food, for sustainability, for producing more than you're taking in. So patterns in nature were something that I was kind of obsessed with too, all growing up. Actually, I had two burning questions most of my childhood, which was, what is my purpose? And how can I be, what does it mean to be a human being? How can I fit into this world without causing damage? And like looking at animals in their environment, they seem to know what they were doing, but for some reason, humans, as a human, I didn't understand what we were doing here. And that really kind of drove me crazy for a while until I found permaculture. And I got a degree at UC Santa Cruz in agroecology and conservation biology with an emphasis in that kind of permaculture direction. And I always looked at systems. I was kind of obsessed with systems in nature and looking at rivers and watersheds. I spent a lot of time looking at rivers and seeing, like, why is von Karman trails so pronounced in nature everywhere? So von Karman trails, they're kind of like pulses of like turbulence and then stillness, kind of like rapids and then pools. But you see it everywhere. You see it in the sky, you see it in currents, you see it in jellyfish and biological organisms, all the things that repeat themselves over and over again. Spirals, the Fibonacci sequence, all these things. So then when I got interested in qigong, we were doing a lot of things with the bagua and the I Ching, and I wanted to understand it more. So I started delving deeper into it. And I always had a love for architecture and buildings as well. And that kind of led me into Feng Shui. And I read a lot of books, and then I took it more seriously and did a very intensive course for a couple of years that was a certificate and kind of thing. And Feng Shui, so what do the words actually mean? It means wind, water. But when you look at the trigrams that they represent, the water trigram and wind is yin wood, water produces yin wood. So it's about growth. It's about fertility. So the wind trigram also represents exchange, trade, growth, sex, romance, travel, but really the essence of all that is trade and prosperity, abundance. So really that's what its meaning is, trying to find within time and space, but mostly space, a way to improve fecundity, to improve fertility. And when you look at Feng Shui, it's there's some parts of it that seem really commonsensical. Like, you want to make sure that there's good flow of air, and especially when you talk about wind and water, like, it's very easy to see the fluid dynamics of that kind of thing. And when you looking at a house, use a lot of observation skills similar to what you would do in permaculture, and look at how are things flowing in the house, what's could be dangerous to your health, like mold, causing mold, and anyway, there's also aspects that are like from human being that is innate in within us for survival skills. So say there are things like in Feng Shui that they call shei qi or poison arrows, things that say they're pointing at you, like rooftop angles or sharp looking edges of their neighbors, or a road that's coming at you at your front door. And they say that these are negative influences. In some circumstances, they're not, but you can think from just like an innate survival instinct of evolution of anything that's sharp that maybe is like tiger claws or a knife or something like that. It's going to cause some sort of something deep within us of fear. So in essence, Feng Shui really is information. There's subliminal information that we are receiving that affects how we think, how we behave, and also we're attracted to certain things that we're familiar with. So my main teacher in Feng Shui, he kind of coined the term psychological Feng Shui. And his big thing was, which I agree with, is that a house is a reflection of a person's consciousness. We, each as individuals, are attracted to certain houses because they confirm or reaffirm judgments and preferences and dislikes about everything in our life. So that's why we're attuned to them. So a lot of times when I see people for Feng Shui audits and they really love a house and it's a terrible house, but they love it because it really hits all the things that they're familiar with, that they want. And a lot of times people will change a house and they go right back into the same kind of house that they were already in, and the same sort of patterns in their life repeat themselves. So that's why what's interesting about it is like patterns in nature repeat themselves over and over again, even in our psychology and in our behavior and our actions. The other thing is when I got into Feng Shui, you have to study the I Ching to understand the symbolism of that and to apply it, because there is the observation aspect of Feng Shui, which I think most people are familiar with or have an idea of what that is. But there's also kind of mathematical formulas associated with Feng Shui. Those get really specific. They're based on timing and direction and the space. So in terms of time, well, the Earth is always spinning. The sun obviously rises in the east, sets in the west, and there's certain things that are always in change, but they're constant, right? They're in a sense they're not changing, right? The sun's 24 hours a day. It's changed every day, but it's always the same kind of change. But within those periods, it's like a spiraling change where year to year, month to month, things change. Even though they're the same change, they change completely. So we have to take that into account as well in Feng Shui. So we have like 20-year time periods that are called ages. We've got the annual influences of the year, the annual influences of the month, the annual influences of the days, even can go down to the annual influences of the hour. But how does it affect your particular home and you as an individual? So we have to also take into account often people's Batsa, which is their Chinese astrology, which is kind of like your DNA in a way that you can't really change, but it shows you epigenetics of certain things that could happen if they're triggered. So in terms of astrology, I think many people could say, hey, some people are born at the same day, same time, same hour. One of them maybe become rich and powerful and the other one isn't. So how could astrology be true and be of any influence? Well, that is true, but it's because we still have to make choices and take actions and do things. The influences are just there, just like genetics. So say somebody is predisposition to a certain illness because their parents had it, doesn't mean they're going to get it. They have to have certain lifestyle factors that trigger it. So it's the same way with astrology. The nice thing about Feng Shui is that even if your astrology isn't very good or your genetics isn't very good, you can do things and change the information in your house so that your behavior changes, and then your actions change, and they can be of a lot of benefit. Also in my life, from a qigong background in Jineng qigong, the Huasha Center, which was developed by Dr. Pang Ming, he had this giant qigong center with 7,000 people practicing at a time, that people would go there with terminal illnesses and chronic illnesses, and they'd go for minimum 1 month at a time, often 3 months or 6 months, sometimes a couple years. And he made a big point about information. He said information is extremely important to people's health and in interaction of change. So he intentionally, he said Feng Shui is something very important that he encouraged people to study, but he'd always have like banners on the wall that said, all good, all healthy, right now, right here, all this kind of really good information. They'd play games where people would laugh and sing just to spread that good information, and not allow newspapers and telephones and things from the outside environment that could give bad information. And that's the biggest thing that I kind of tell my clients and try to teach my clients, is it's all about information. It's not so much the esoteric energy that people are thinking of. It's actually really down to earth, and it makes a lot of sense when you look at it. I think another thing is charms. Like a lot of Feng Shui practitioners kind of prescribe charms as cures for people. And I've even seen some houses I've done where they've had other Feng Shui masters come and do things for them, and they have like thousands of dollars of junk all over their house. And for the most part, I don't think it's helping. It's probably hindering things. One is something that doesn't even fit your decor of your house and doesn't even fit your culture is going to be an eyesore that's going to grab your attention, and it's probably going to cause a negative effect rather than the beneficial effect that it's trying to cause. But if you look at the underlying principles of why those charms are said to be cures, then it starts to make more sense. Because the whole idea of Feng Shui, again, is observations of patterns in nature. And one of those ways of looking at things is through growth and control, production and destruction in a way. So in nature, things are always growing, but nothing in nature can continually grow out of control. That's cancerous. Something needs to control it. So as a Chinese medicine practitioner, you're very familiar with the 5-element Wuxing, 5 phases, and that's a predominant feature in Feng Shui. So we're always looking at what direction are we facing? How does that affect the elemental makeup of that section of the house in that particular time period, as well as the relationship to what is favorable to the person at that time. And then how do we mitigate it? So say somebody's one sector of their house, there's an excess of wood, and that may manifest because it's not a beneficial element for them at this time. It can manifest as frustration, anger, like extreme creativity, but without any outlet to put it into action. Then it creates a lot of frustration and irritability and relationship problems. So just by putting something there to control the wood, whether that is a metal object that can chop the wood. Of course, we don't want something that's going to cause more conflict. Sometimes metal chopping wood can cause more conflict. So maybe we want to put in something that's going to decrease the wood with a little bit of fire or something like that. So that's kind of the idea behind Feng Shui.
That's pretty cool. I didn't realize, honestly, that it went so deep. So that was an amazing explanation. I love the permaculture example. So I've never heard Feng Shui called an audit before. So yeah, how frequently are you supposed to have Feng Shui done? As far as, do you wait before you're buying a house or before something traumatic's happening in your life? How frequently are you supposed to get Feng Shui done?
That's an excellent question. I would say I would have it done before I even buy a place or even rent a place, because it makes such a big impact on your life. It's all about affecting the way that you think, and then your thoughts are going to affect your behavior. So for my clients, I usually put them on like a retainer. So I say, hey, you go out, look at as many houses as you want, and up to say 5 houses or 10 houses for one fee. I'm just on call. You call me, I'll go out to a site visit, and we need the year the building was built, as well as a floor plan to scale. And then we can just do quickly, is this good enough to even pass, to even move into, before we go even further than that. Same thing for businesses. So we do a lot of business feng shui. So for any business, you want the CEO or the boss to be thinking very clearly. You also want money coming into the door, and also want to be visible and be in tune with your market and all of that. So we do the same thing for businesses when they're looking for spaces. Say, we'll be kept on retainer, find one that fits the best that we can do, that we can live with. And then from there, we go into a lot more detail of how can we make it work better? How can we maximize the auspicious aspects, and how do we minimize the negative aspects? The other issue is the age of the house or the age of the building. Because there's 20-year ages, the auspicious elements and negative elements change every 20 years. So nothing is stuck in time. This is good feng shui, this is bad feng shui. Everything is in a state of change. So it depends. Like right now, we're 4 years away from changing from the age of 8 into the age of 9. So often current age houses tend to typically have pretty good feng shui. I mean, there's exceptions. Sometimes they're terrible, but for the most part, they're better than most. And now we're getting close to the time when people say are moving into age of 8 houses, but we're about to flip into the age of 9. So things could change very rapidly. People that have had feng shui audits in the past and think that their house is actually pretty good, it could change quite a bit in 4 years. And then on top of that, we've got the annual influences. So for my clients, usually the most important thing is when you're looking for a house or you move into a house, let's try to get you in the best house possible. If that hasn't happened, you're already in a house and you're already seeing problems or certain issues. We often look at a floor plan, and just a lot of times there's a lot of information in the floor plan itself. You can see the relationships with people within the floor plan. Say the masculine side of the house is dominating the feminine side, then you can already see what's kind of happening between the people there. Or say the back of the house, which often represents our resources, our spine, our mother, our parents, that sort of thing. Sometimes people do renovations on the back of their house to open them up, and all of a sudden they've got all sorts of problems, either with their mother or with their family, or sometimes I've even seen physical problems like neck and back problems, and pain and things like that. The other thing is what happens outside of your house can influence your house. So say your neighbor starts doing construction on one side of the house, and say it's on the feminine side. Now, because of all the disruption going on with the construction, all of a sudden the female living on that in that house starts having issues that start coming to the surface that weren't necessarily there beforehand. The aspects that they affect in terms of symbolism and characteristics of personality, they actually depend on the particular flying stars. And that's where it gets a little bit complicated. To get the flying stars is a mathematical equation that is based on a compass reading. And the compass reading is used in a Chinese compass called a lopan. And the lopan has the I Ching hexagrams on it, as well as the stems and branches. And it got an earth plate and a heaven plate. And you have to align the house up to see what the actual degrees are on a compass. Then you can plot out a chart. That's where a lot of problems have come, where people want me to do long distance for them. And I've, for that kind of detailed chart, like we can do other things in terms of just form, but in terms of flying star chart, I have to actually go there in person to do these compass readings to get an accurate reading, or somebody that can do it to get an accurate reading. Otherwise, it could be off by just a small half a degree or 1 degree, and then you would have a totally different chart. I think did I answer the question?
Yes, you did. It was, yes. So if you are already in a home and you get your home feng shuied, how long does it normally take to notice a difference for the client?
Oh, often really fast, within a few days, sometimes hours.
Okay, so it can be pretty dramatic.
It can be very dramatic. There have been times, like one client in particular, their business wasn't doing very well, and it had been doing phenomenal until about 2 years ago. And then by just doing a couple of changes, all of a sudden the phone started ringing, more business started coming in within that week already.
Wow.
But there's also, it can be short, small changes, or it can be really big, long-term changes. Depends on the severity of the issue that we're treating as well.
Sure. So, I mean, there's a gazillion books out there on feng shui and classes online and stuff like that. Is there something, if someone's trying to do basic things themselves, that you could, I don't know, route them towards, like the proper way to do things if they're wanting to do like basic things themselves?
Yeah. So the first thing is, your bedroom is the most important room in your house. That's for everyone. You got to sleep well. If you're not sleeping well, then every aspect of your life is affected. So in order to sleep well, not even knowing what the energetic influences are of the house, but just making sure that there's a solid wall behind your bed, or at least a tall kind of bed head, something that feels like in feng shui we call it a mountain, which is like this protective feeling behind you. And you can think of that as, when you're sleeping, is the most vulnerable you are any time of the day. And innately, because we still are animals, even though we think that we're not, somebody could come in and attack us. It could be a tiger, it could be another human, whatever. If we have something solid behind us that our head is against, then we feel more secure. Same thing with the sides of the bed. When you put end tables or bedside tables up against the bed, it kind of reinforces that feeling of security. And there's a lot of things in feng shui are just based on that sort of thing, of that security feeling, of feeling safe. That's another thing that's interesting about seeing society kind of change as well. So in the past, most houses, the focus of a yard was the front yard. Children would play in the front yard. Children would play in the street if it was in a suburb with other kids in the front, and the back wasn't really much there. And that's in tune with classical feng shui principles, because that is like protection, security behind you. No one can come up behind you and sneak into your house, right? And it's also socially, we're going out into the world. Nowadays, people are like opening up their backyards and everything's behind the scenes, and you can see like a lack of community. We're much more much more closed as a society, and more narcissistic, really. Yeah. So that's an interesting trend that you kind of see with Feng Shui as well.
Okay. Does it matter as far as having, I've heard about like having electronics and Wi-Fi and all that kind of stuff. Does that come into play for the bedroom, especially since you were saying that's kind of the most important room in the house?
Definitely. So EMF obviously is new. It's not a part of classical Feng Shui, but it's got to have an effect on us. So I always recommend not having like turning your Wi-Fi off at night.
Mhm.
It's better not to have it, but that's unrealistic. Everyone's going to have Wi-Fi. So at least turn it off at night, and don't have your mobile phones in your room next to your bed. Try to get a real alarm clock or something. And just trying to minimize the EMF as the best we can.
Cool. So is there anything about like the front door, like coming into the front door? I know I've heard you're supposed to keep like your front entryway clean so that, you know, things coming in, the good energies coming in and all that kind of stuff. Does it matter as far as the entryway as well? Because I know you said the bedroom's important. So what else is?
Yeah. So from a form school perspective,
Mhm.
the bedroom is the most important.
Mhm.
Then secondly is the mountain of the building, which is the back of the building, or the back wall of the building, or the backyard of the building. We want that to be kind of solid and containing and protective to
Mhm.
offer security. And then the next important thing is the energy coming into the building. We want it to come in not in a huge rush like a tidal wave. We want it to kind of come in slowly and kind of settle. So there's what we call a Ming Tong. Ming Tong is the front of the building. So initially, this is like a gathering place of energy. So you can see like big successful shopping centers, like say Walmart. They have a huge parking lot in front of their building. That's a Ming Tong. That's where energy, people are coming from all directions to gather, and they settle, and then they come in. And then once you come into the house, so for a normal like residential house, that would be like the typical picket fence with a little yard in front for energy. You just come over, and you can think of that picket fence as like the lips or the teeth of your mouth that kind of like protect the everything going into your body. They allow things in, but they also don't allow things out. So it's kind of like the energy can come in, settle, and it's there. And then the same thing when you open up the front door. Yes, you don't want clutter. You want kind of an open space, another little Ming Tong for energy to settle.
Cool. So, what else can I ask you about Feng Shui? So if my house is cluttered, which most people, if they're human like I am, I always feel like I have to get my house clean before I could start with somebody doing Feng Shui. Is that true? Or do you help us kind of learn where to start and kind of what to do first so we don't feel overwhelmed?
I find that people that try to clean their houses before I come, it's still very obvious where their issues are, because they will only clean up one area, and then
Certain
you'll go
things.
to another part of the house, and there's like, oh, there's your clutter. And usually where the clutter is, then you're like, well, what does that represent in terms of the house? Is it a certain family member? Is it a certain personality trait? Is it a certain theme in life that is being affected? And then we'll ask them about it. Say, oh, is your youngest daughter not doing so well in school? And be like, oh, no, she's not. She's really been having problems. That's part of the reason why we want you to come over. And then be like, well, we need to clean up that area and do something there to help, and maybe
That's
move her
awesome.
bed.
So it doesn't really matter as far as meaning whether people clean up or not, meaning you
No,
can come at any point in time.
well, no, it's kind of like when people come to see you for Chinese medicine, and then they like brush their teeth and they brush the coat off their tongue and try to look the best. And when you're feeling their pulse, like, I'm going to try to make it so you can't feel anything. And
Yeah. Cool. All right. Is there anything else that would be informative for everyone about Feng Shui to know?
I think the biggest take home message is that it's really all about information. information that is you can see and information that is unseen. So we're bombarded with information all the time. We just don't really take it into account.
Right.
And humans, this is also kind of from a permaculture perspective, is that we're very good at being able to change our environments faster than we can think of what it's going to do as a consequence. And it's kind of the state of the world. When we take that into account for our homes, we often rush and do things without taking into thought about how that is going to affect us. And so the information is information that we actually send out, that we're attracted to. So say the people that you spend your time with are going to affect how you think and what you agree with and what your judgments and preferences and all that are. If you don't experience different people with different perspectives, your ideas and about things and actions in life don't change. So same thing with the house. You're going to probably be attracted to a certain house because it fits your ideas and preferences and judgments, which may not be good for you. So then we need to do some other sort of information in the house that then kind of balances it. So you are able to change the way that you think. It's Feng Shui is a very powerful tool for changing people's lives and helping people.
Well, and it's about a lot more than just adjusting your furniture, which is a lot of people think what Feng Shui is. So that's amazing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think of it as just like interior design, or
Right.
but it's not really that. It's really a tool to help your life, to change.
Well, I was going to say, change your whole life. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, it was amazing talking with you today, RJ, and hopefully we'll get to chat again sometime soon, okay?
All right. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.